Hey, thanks for tuning in to another normal episode of the Business of Fun podcast. How have you enjoyed the mini episodes that I have been putting out there? If you have enjoyed them, which my guest today, Greg Turner, said he did enjoy them, let me know. Send me an email. It is my name. It is dave@davewakeman.com. And, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. If there's any episode or any idea you might like me to cover, you want to hear more about. I'm trying to play with the podcast format a little bit to give you something a little bit different or something a little more valuable. My guest today is a guy by the name of Greg Turner, who I know you have heard from before. Greg is based in China, and we'll talk about Greg in a minute. But first, before I get to Greg, let me tell you to make sure you check out my friends at Booking Protect, refund protection, making sure that your customers feel safe, making sure that your customers feel comfortable. Buying tickets is a super important idea right now. Check them out at bookingprotect.com and get hooked up with refund protection. Now is the perfect time to talk to Kat and Simon and Kath and all of those good folks. So do that. Also, make sure you check out the We Will Recover project. It is a partnership between the folks at Activity Stream and about 20 or 25 people from around the world. I send over content. Angela and Joe from Ticketing Professionals in Australia send over some stuff. Andrew and Carol from TPC in the UK send stuff over. NTIX, TRG, QQ, all kinds of people. They send stuff over. It's at wewillrecover.live. Check it out and check out Activity Stream. Okay? If you are listening to this podcast right now, make sure you check out the Talking Tickets newsletter. It is my newsletter. It comes out on Fridays. You get it at talkingtickets.substack.com. 5 top stories with some analysis and action items. It's totally awesome, if I do say so myself. Back to my guest today is Greg Turner. He is from China. And the excuse that we used was the Chinese New Year. So I needed to say hello to my friend. But I wanted to have Greg on because China has come back online pretty well. As Greg's going to tell us, he's going to explain what the situation looks like in China, what some of the travel restrictions look like, or some of the lockdowns and shutdowns look like. We're going to talk about whether or not now is a good time to look to do business in China. If you are going to look, what it should look like, some of the considerations you should make. We talk about the upcoming Olympics in Japan and in China. We talk about the different social media platforms. We talk about advertising. We talk about marketing and selling and how it is different and the same in China versus the States. As always with Greg, it was great to catch up with him. So I hope you dig this one. I think this is the third time he's been on here on the Business of Fun. All right, I think this makes Greg's third time being on the podcast. Greg Turner, man, what's up?
Hey, Dave, it's good to talk to you. How you been?
The temperature has turned down a little bit in D.C. It's become a little less crazy to live here the last few weeks, so I'm totally fine. I am bunkered down in my basement. The only light that gets in is like about the light from my neighbor's kitchen, because it's like the back door of my basement is right to his window. Luckily, we're friends, so I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. I mean, it's. I think we're living in different worlds these days more than ever, because we had our issues about this time last year, but for the past 8-9 months, it's been free sailing for us.
Yeah. What do you So let me get you to repeat that for people. So for the last 8 or 9 months, it's been normal times almost.
I would say if we're talking COVID wise. We haven't had any kind of real restrictions on our lives since about May. May, I think, is when the doors really kind of opened up across the whole country. We've got some simple stuff like wearing masks. Everybody's still wearing masks. A lot of temperature checks everywhere you go. And then there's also some, there's some tracking going on, constant tracking of us with QR codes and scanning and confirming when we're in which buildings. But other than that, we don't have any kind of lockdown effect or any kind of issues at all. So it's a little surreal sometimes to be here and living it like we're past COVID, and then seeing so many friends and everybody still dealing with it in Canada and the US and across Europe.
Yeah, it's been rough around these parts, I think. I guess that's like an understatement. So when you say, though, that things are back to normal, right?
Yep.
So that means people go to events.
Absolutely.
People go to the movies. They go out to
Yep.
they go out to eat in like inside restaurants.
Inside packed restaurants.
Man alive.
Absolutely packed.
That's crazy.
It's yeah. They started opening up the movie theaters and events in about about July and August last year. And it was a gradual progression, starting from maybe about 30% capacity and then moving up to 50% capacity and then 75. And now there isn't really any limits on capacity, any formal limits. But what we're finding is that there's an informal limit put on place where people, when they start seeing events is starting to get too full, they're not going to be the ones to buy the last few tickets because they don't want to be in such a packed building. But other than that, I mean, we had a summer full of music festivals, and we had the basketball league here and the football league are roaring and going crazy with packed stands.
No, that's awesome. So really the only limits that you're really seeing are imposed limits, like are self-imposed. So people have, they're using their own, sort of risk tolerance on whether or not they want to go into a full event, but it's not demanded. Like you can sell 100% no matter what.
Pretty much. It's a fluid situation. So you'll get some cities that cut it back every once in a while because they feel a risk coming. And especially now with Chinese New Year almost upon us, it's been especially focused because there's just so much travel over that time. But in general, there's not really a lot of restrictions left.
So with so much of the world shut down, right? You're able to be back to normal. What's the nature of the events you're having? Like you had the Chinese Basketball Association. Is it the CBA, the Chinese Basketball Association?
The CBA, the CSL, the China Super League is the football. Mm-hmm. Those have both been running. You have a lot of marathons and running events and a lot of public health events.
Yep.
There's some other sports that have minor kinds of events or local organizations. But what's really been missing is international content because they've been closed. And originally, when they closed the borders to international events, they left a small window open for test events for the Winter Olympics. But about 2 months ago, they canceled all of those as well because they couldn't find a good way to let those high-risk countries bring their athletes away. They couldn't agree with high-risk countries on how to get their athletes into the country for the test events. So we have no international content here at all right now. It's all really focused on domestic stuff.
And how has that been for the domestic market? Because and I'm going to ask what probably is a dumb question, but that's okay because that won't be the first time today that I've done this. But so, what has that been like for the domestic artists and the domestic content that you're achieving? You're receiving, because if I'm not mistaken, probably some of the international market was flooding out or overshadowing some of the domestic artists and performers, or was that not really the case because the market was so thirsty for events that there was plenty of room for everybody?
I would say that the Summer Music Festival really benefited from the situation. You had audiences across all different kinds of festivals that you'd never seen before. And I think that the CSL and the CBA especially are going to be in for some pretty exciting years. Because again, there is no, there's usually a lot of tennis. There's the F1, there's the NBA coming here for their annual games. There's so much international content across the country normally, but all that's gone. So not only do you have the the attention gap for the fans, but you also have all of this talent that previously was working on those international events that are bringing that, that expertise that they developed over the years to the domestic events as well. So that's going to bring domestic events, I think, to an all new level, and it's kind of a very special year for the domestic market.
So what you're saying is, to use I think this is probably a very American phrase, you've turned lemons into lemonade.
It seems like it, yeah. We'll see how they deliver, but all the pieces are in place, right?
Yeah.
Everything that's needed is there. It depends on how well they can put it all together.
Yeah. So now let me ask you this, because one of the ruses when we said we were going to do this was like, this is a great time to talk because it's the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
It's the year of the ox, correct?
Yeah, we're moving into the year of the ox. So
tell me what that means for me.
Well, when were you born?
In 74. I think I was the year 74. Of the tiger.
Yeah, so that's probably year of the tiger. You're a couple years away still. But year of the ox, for those that are born in the year of the ox, they tend to be more stoic and hardworking, and all the characteristics you can imagine for an ox. We're coming out of the year of the rat, which sounds like it should be maybe a not such a good year, but here the rat is kind of seen as like a very imaginative and creative and resourceful animal. So it's not such a bad thing to be born in the year of the rat either. Year of the ox, parents tend not to favor having kids during the year of the ox. They want to have the more exciting animals, but I think that overall they're happy when kids come.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and I bring that up because you don't get out of here without a couple jokes at my expense. Mm-hmm. But you were talking about before about how there are concerns about dealing with the virus now because of the Chinese New Year.
Yep.
Are there going to be are the parades and the gatherings, they're going to go on like normal, or are there going to be kind of new precautions put in place, or are there any kind of like next level precautions or like anything new? And mainly just because people who are listening to this are going to be curious about how a big event like this is being handled during the pandemic.
Right. Well, I think probably the most important thing to when you think about Chinese New Year and the risk of the pandemic is to realize in a normal year you'd be looking at 500 million people or 700 million people moving at the same time to their hometowns or to where their family's living at the time or whatever it is. So it's a huge number of people moving across the country, and the risk of that then being a super spreader event is obvious to everybody. So I would say for the past month, the government has really focused on cracking down on it, especially because we did have a couple outbreaks across the country in a few different cities. So it's been, while we haven't had any kind of lockdown or anything like that, I think the last few weeks everybody's been a lot more aware and focused on making sure that the rules that are in place have been enforced have been followed quite closely as much as we can. But because of the pre-work, now we're back to basically no new domestically or internally transferred cases. Everything that's getting reported now is all again from people flying from outside of China into the country.
Yeah.
So that's kind of got everybody feeling a little bit better about the new year, and I think it should be a pretty good celebration.
Well, I hope so. But I want to ask this question because I kind of want to frame it for people who are listening. Because it's going to be, there's some Chinese listeners, obviously, but a lot of it's Europe and the U.S. and Australia. And Australia is different because I'm about to use their example to get your example. I was talking to my good friend Angela Higgins in Australia earlier, and she's like going, oh, yeah, like Australia will go down, like different states will go down if there's like 3 or 4 cases because it's eradication is the goal.
Yep.
When you talk about like there's minor outbreaks, how many cases are you talking about? 10.
I think I think one city was up to about 100 cases, but most of those are asymptomatic. And in China, they wouldn't necessarily shut down a city anymore over 10 cases because they have such a strong track and tracing and such a strong response system already in place. So as an example, I've got a friend up in Shanghai. He was faced with Shanghai had about 5 or 6 cases break out one day, and one of them was in a building within his neighborhood, an apartment building within his neighborhood. And in that building, they shut down the whole building for 2 weeks. They quarantined the whole building, this whole apartment building, maybe 40 stories. The whole building was shut down for 2 weeks. And then outside, they'd set up basically a testing area for everybody that was in the building to come outside once a day. All these people in hazmat suits standing there, testing them, and then sending them back into the building. And just the control that they have over the situation, and the acceptance that everybody has that this is what I need to do to make sure that we don't have an outbreak across the country is I think part of the big reason why China's managed to keep it under control for so long.
I mean, it sounds 10 cases, and you're able to keep things going. It sounds it's incredible.
And the response, 10 cases, and they'll have 200 people respond to it, just like that, to keep it under control.
I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about what like strategy requires focus. I mean, and that's seriously some focus right there. Yeah. That's and I think, at least to me, it's understanding that you can control these things, and that like you can get some control over the situation, get back to normal is very hopeful sounding. But let me shift it a little bit so we can move away from the virus to whatever comes next, right? Which, I mean, for you is already, you're telling me it's you're going to go on a trip, you got like all kinds of great stuff going on. When do you think things are going to start to open up so that you can, like people can come back to China?
Well, I think the rollout of the vaccine is really going to be the key to it. The Olympics in Tokyo, I think, are going to be a good challenge to see how much we can do for an international event on a global scale. If the Tokyo Olympics can get put together, I don't know. I call them 50-50. But then after that, the Beijing Olympics are probably the next big one that's on the calendar, at least in this part of the world. So there's already a lot of talk on how they're going to deal with that. I think, as I mentioned, one of the categories that was originally kept open to do events, international events, was the test events for the Olympics, but they couldn't work out an agreement between the different countries on quarantine issues and those kinds of things. So we're really going to have to wait and see how this vaccine rolls out and make sure that no countries are going to play politics with it in terms of accepting, this vaccine will work, I'll accept this vaccine, but that vaccine, if you took that, you can't come in anymore either. Right. There's a lot of questions to be worked out, I think. Yeah. It's tough to say when they'll open up.
Okay, so I guess then that was, knowing that like the Olympics and, the pandemic put a little halt on a lot of people's ideas, what can people do if they've been wanting to investigate China, or they've been thinking about coming to China, if they're like me looking for an excuse to come visit China, what is there anything people can do right now? Is there anything they can look at? Because a lot of people kept asking me before times, like, what do you know about China, or how are you approaching China, or what's going on with China? And I said, I don't know the answer, but I do have Greg Turner's phone number. And so, like, what would people do now?
It was great. I missed those.
What's that?
I missed those days. I couldn't keep the phone from ringing. It was awesome.
Yeah, I was like, I do have Greg's phone number. He will pick up if I call, I think. But how would you tell people to approach this now? Because I think what's going to happen is, or at least this is what I'm seeing in the research, is that a lot of countries are going to be struggling to grow, or they're going to be struggling to create opportunities, and so they're going to look around the world. Yeah. Obviously, one of the huge markets is China. Whether, and you and I both know this, and we've talked about this online and offline many, many times. It's about the nature of doing business in China. Yeah. Has it changed due to the pandemic? And B, what should people be thinking about or doing or considering right now?
Yeah. So, I know that we were talking about how domestic events are really the focus, but I think that people should understand that as an opportunity. Internet, people from around the world that are interested in the market should understand that as an opportunity, because it's a time right now that you could really dig into creating a good China plan or a good China strategy, because you can't be here and doing the event, but there's a lot of resources that are available. Greg Turner is a great example of that, who can help you to, it's just a shameless plug.
That's Greg at gregturner.net. Is that right?
Who can help you to figure out some of those questions you have and start putting those pieces in place. Because once those questions get answered on how vaccines are going to work out and when the borders are going to open up, the first country that's going to be back in swing and full speed is going to be China. Because people here have the desire and they have the interest and they want to be going to events. I think they're going to be very nervous to do international travel, so they're going to want to see international content in China. And for service providers, the growth and the boom I expect in domestic events is going to be a great new opportunity and market for those that service those service events. And how can you get your product or your service in here to help that, to take a piece of that boom? So taking some time right now and considering what you think China's about, and then talking to somebody who knows who has some experience in the market to help you refine what those concepts are you have, can really help to put the first steps in place for building something great for once this pandemic passes.
Yeah, and one word of caution, and this is I'm going to use this word of caution in the form of a question, I guess, in the form of, it's not going to end with a question mark, but it's a question, is I want to warn people, though, that just assuming that the way that, let's say in America, that the business in China operates the same way is not accurate.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think last time I was on the podcast, we went through this in a bit on the macro scale, with the whole idea of that in China, companies work for the government, whereas in the West, it tends to be more that the government works for companies, and that's absolutely still the case, if not more. The current leadership in China, if you follow the news and what's happened with Jack Ma and the Alipay and the IPO there, is a perfect example of once you step out of line with the government, what happens next is they come in with a pretty strong hammer and beat you back into place. So that macro level stuff hasn't changed at all. So taking the time then, once you wrap your head around that and you understand, okay, well, I've got to come in looking first of all at where the government's putting their priorities and how can I align with that, and then once you have that in your head and you have as the guiding principle that you need to build your China strategy, then you can start looking at some of the more the finer details, like how do you put together your marketing plan, how do you reach your customers, how do you make sure your IP is all taken care of, all of these kinds of things that are, for Western countries or for Western companies, maybe you've got some ideas that you thought you read about in the news, but probably, honestly, if you read it in the Western news, it might not give you quite the detail you really need.
Now, let me ask you this, because this is, I think, there's two questions I know are going to be probably super important to people as they consider this. Mm-hmm. The first one is, how is marketing and sales different than it is in the West? And for people who this is the first time they're hearing Greg grew up in Canada, so Greg is almost American in his viewpoint of the world. Don't be insulted by that. I meant that lovingly. but I only say that because you understand how Western businesses operate, right? And like you said, in America, it's government works to support the business, not vice versa, and that has an impact on the way people market and sell. And I think it's enlightening for people to understand how the marketing and sales process is slightly different in China versus the West.
Right. So right now, what's really e-commerce in China is massive, and marketing, digital marketing, social media marketing, all that kind of stuff is really the key. I think another thing that's important to to understand from the very beginning is that in general, people don't really trust brands, especially the younger generation. They don't really think that brands understand them and support them in the way that they want. They buy brands, but they don't listen to brand messaging. What's kind of emerged here, and this has kind of been done because of the way that social media is set up, is that it's more about peer-to-peer marketing or peer-to-peer discussions that really help to set somebody's opinion on what they want to get. And maybe I'll just take a step back with all this and just for the, I think one thing that I always laugh about, or that I think really doesn't do justice, is when I see in the Western media when people say that WeChat is the Chinese version of Twitter, or Weibo is the Chinese version of Facebook, or those kinds of comparisons. It's a false equivalent. It doesn't really work out like that at all, because the way that they're structured is very different. I think that we can look at WeChat specifically as a bit of a case study on how marketing is really evolving in China. And there's some stuff here that people can take either as a part of a China strategy, or even maybe consider how they can use it in their own domestic market strategy. So WeChat first and foremost doesn't sell users data, and everything they do, they don't make any money off their users. They make all of their money off of content that they create and then they provide to their users to make the environment more engaging. So you don't have any of that big push for you to follow. They don't give you suggested accounts to follow. They don't give you a lot of advertising. They don't give you a lot of unwanted content in your feed or in your moments. So it's in that way, it's very difficult for a brand to use WeChat to connect with consumers, because you can't target them and find them and then give them ads every day. There are some advertising options, but they're very limited, and the privacy of the individual users is very well protected. So the way it's kind of developed with WeChat is that WeChat groups within WeChat are very popular. You have, I think I'm probably in. You set up groups in WeChat just for whatever reason, and you've got all different kinds of groups that have been set up over the years for people to communicate with their friends or their families, or to learn more about something that they're interested in, or to and it's really just a small group of up to 200 people, maybe 500 people that have a shared interest that want to talk about something. And so what's been happening is that brands now, because they can't have that direct marketing as an option, they instead have they've started using these groups to kind of direct conversation, where they set up a group using a KOL or some sort of influencer that is involved with the kind of lifestyle that this brand wants to be part of, and then uses that to kind of guide the influence those within the group to the products that they want to be selling. So it's not a direct advertisement. It's really quite a subtle and quite a unique way to create interest in your products, if that makes any sense.
So probably to make it simple for people, it's like it's influencer marketing, but done in like probably a smarter way.
Yeah, small scale, very small scale.
Yeah. And it takes a lot more advantage, or it weaponizes, and I mean that in a good way, word of mouth marketing.
Yep.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
And then the big one here is that, so because this is an important point, and this is going to fill up my inbox with lots of hate mail, and that's totally cool what I'm about to say. So I'm going to say it loudly. In general, in China, people don't trust brands.
No,
so
they don't.
They buy brands, but they don't trust them.
No.
I'm going to tell you a secret. Anybody who tells you that people trust brands, or that the brands have purpose, or that brands are doing all these things, they're lying to you. It's all BS anyway. Brands take up a small portion of people's awareness and attention in most cases anyway. So I don't think that's unique.
Yeah.
So rain down the hate mail. It's fine. Brand purpose is BS.
But I mean, it's really extreme here, Dave. Like brands websites have no meaning. The people don't use websites at all here. Email marketing doesn't exist. There is no email marketing because once you're out of the office, you close your email box down and you don't look at it again until the next day. And you don't.
There's a lot more balance in the way people deal with like work and life.
No, I wouldn't say that. There's Jack Ma's favorite 9-9-6, 9 to 9, 6 days a week, working ethic. But in general, there's people they just don't subscribe to email. They don't subscribe to email mailing lists. It's just something that's never taken hold here. And so that's why this whole private group or this private group marketing is really taken hold, because there aren't a lot of other ways for brands to communicate, or for companies to communicate with consumers. So much television is less and less important here. It's all now about the Douyin and the Bilibili, which aren't the equivalent to YouTube or anything like that. They're again their own separate ecosphere that lives and exists in a completely different way. But
let me ask you this then: in a way, some of the I try to be, and this is a term that I don't know if I've mentioned here. I like to be media agnostic when I'm talking about any kind of strategy. But a lot of the tools that maybe we consider old school, they take on an added benefit in China or in Asia. And by those things, I mean like billboards and like, direct promotions and things like where you're actually engaging people in like the physical form out in the world. Those are also more important.
Just to some degree. I mean, there's billboards and there's neon everywhere here type of thing. If neon was still a big thing for signage, but it's really the strongest way to connect to consumers here is through direct messaging in small groups, peer-to-peer type of level. So that's why KOLs here drive messages across the board. Live streaming has become a really big thing. Something like 10% of all e-commerce is driven through a small group of live streamers, of KOL live streamers. They have this huge pull on the market.
Tell people what KOL means, just so they know what it means.
No problem. Key opinion leader. Yeah. So it's young kids with trendy attitudes and trendy styles that others aspire to follow and become, and they set the trends. They set the message so well. There's one guy, his name is Austin Lee, and he can sell stuff online like a madman. He'll put out $1 million in an hour for sales, easy.
I got to meet this Austin Lee.
Yeah, he's a character. He's a makeup. He sells makeup, believe it or not.
Well, isn't that one of those things that's like become a trend? Is like guys wearing makeup and It
is actually. Yeah, it's a little bit. And I just read that the government is coming out with a report to try and control, not stop, but control the trend, right? And make sure that it's China's a little old school. They still like to have their men as they still envision men as strong and strong, manly
stereotypical ideas. Yeah,
stereotypical. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. So they're trying to control that a little bit, but not stop it.
I mean, who knew? This is great. This is awesome. I mean, I learned so much when I talk to you. This is so good. I mean, the tech platforms that we're talking about, they aren't really equivalent to the things in the West, which means that you have to understand how they function, right?
Yeah. And you can't just take the content that you built for Facebook or Twitter or for any Western media, social media, drop it into Chinese social media and think that it's going to work because
that's not the case. Yeah.
Yeah, the platforms don't match.
Right. Well, also the thing is like it's insulting to your audience. Yeah. Because you're just saying that, like, hey, look, I'm going to tell you what you're supposed to think. I'm not going to meet you where you are. And that's like to me, that's a foundational principle of marketing. It's like, what do I think people want? I don't know, but I can go find the answer. That's like,
right.
The key. And I would never do that, because that's insulting to the audience I'm trying to reach. And I know that, like, in certain cultures, if you treat them poorly to begin with, you may never get a chance to come back. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a cultural thing. It's not just like you made a bad marketing decision. It's like you've disrespected us, and it's stupid.
Yeah. And I think that's happened to a few brands over here, where they never quite connected on a cultural level, and they put their 5 years in, and then they packed up and went home.
I'm sure that's easy to do as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let me see if I can recap this thing now. All right.
Sure.
So China's back to normal.
So far, so good.
10 cases is a lot.
Yeah.
So was it 700 million people are going to be traveling for the Chinese New Year back to their villages, their towns, where their parents are? This is amazing to me.
Yeah.
But now's a great time to create a strategy to come to China, because there's going to be a lot of need. Some of the domestic artists and the domestic opportunities are tremendous. They're great, right? Especially like the CBA, the CBL, the shows and productions. It's going to be amazing. Strangely enough, I got to look up Austin Lee on the internet, and I know that there's neon everywhere, so I'm excited. Peer-to-peer marketing is super important for people.
Yeah.
So email and TV are less important. And then the big things are respect your audience, have a plan, and work the plan. So know where you're going to compete, and know how you're going to win.
Yeah. That's and make sure that you're aware culturally of what to say and what to do. Because one small word can have such a deep impact here for a foreign brand. Yeah.
And like we said, you can make one mistake and it can ruin your entire strategy for coming to China.
Yeah.
Now, because I'm smart enough to know that I would need an expert. How people find you, because you're my go-to expert.
Yeah. Well, you already gave me the nice plug for the email address, so that's Greg at Greg.
Plug away, man. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, Greg at gregturner.net. I also put a lot of content onto LinkedIn. It's the one Western social media here that's easily accessible. I don't have to turn on a VPN to get onto. So there's a lot of content I put on there with my thoughts and ideas on what's going on in China's live events and sports industry, either government-wise or commercially or anything like that. So, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on there as well. The LinkedIn, I think, is Greg Allen Turner. But if you just search Greg Turner China, you'll find me fast. Yeah,
and to totally plug you a little bit more, the content you do put up is great. You put things in context. You give people enough knowledge that they can take action, or at least understand what they need to know to be able to figure out what they don't know. So if you have any interest in China at all as a market, you should talk to Greg, or at least follow him on LinkedIn, because I travel a lot and I know stuff, but I learn something every time I talk to you. So, thank you for doing this again. And thank you for rubbing our noses in the West and the fact that you're going to go to Chinese New Year parties. Jeez Louise, man.
It's usually right now, to be honest, at this time, I would be on the ski hills in Japan. But because of this is going to be the first time in 8 years, I haven't been able to get over to Japan and get on the ski hills. So I guess I do have to sacrifice something. It's a lot less than what you guys
We all are sacrificing something. Oh, man. Greg, thank you so much, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back again, Dave. And
what did you think of my conversation with Greg Turner? Greg's back. Happy Year of the Ox, right? Let me know. It's Dave at DaveWakeman.com. You can check out my website. It's DaveWakeman.com. You go to the blog there. It has been a new blog there every day of the year so far, and I'm going to try to keep it up. Maybe not all of them are long and in-depth. It's just something to keep my head on straight during the pandemic, amongst other things. Make sure you check out the Talking Tickets newsletter. That is my weekly wrap up of things and tickets. I use it as a way to help share ideas from around the world, point to things that are going to be helpful to people as they recover and get back to business. All kinds of great stuff. You can get the newsletter. You can send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com, and just ask for it. I'll put you on the list. Or if you want to go directly to the website, it's talkingtickets.substack.com. I was early on Substack, so don't think I'm jumping on the bandwagon. Make sure you connect with me on social media. I'm at David Wakeman on Twitter, or you can connect me on LinkedIn. Check out my friends at Booking Protect, the global leaders in refund protection. Right now, refund protection, if you have not already talked to somebody about it, it's super important. There's no better people to help you understand it than Kat and Simon and Kath. Check them out, bookingprotect.com. We put some great content up. I've got some ideas for some stuff we're going to put up probably soon anyway. But check them out. Reach out to Kat and Kath. Just have the conversation, because refund protection, the peace of mind it gives people, it's going to be really, really more important because, we're likely to be dealing with ups and downs of openings and closings and lockdowns and uncertainty around the opening of events for the next, at least through the rest of the year, I would assume. Make sure you check out the We Will Recover project. That's at wewillrecover.live. It is a partnership. The guys and girls at Activity Stream pulled the thing together. They've done a tremendous job of bringing ideas from around the world to people so that you can have the opportunity to recover and learn from some of the best in the business and me. All kinds of great stuff. There's going to be some new webinars. I'm working with my friend Cassie down in Australia. We're going to put together a nice little webinar series that's going to cover topics, for people all over the place. But we're going to do some that are timed specifically for Australia so that we don't, that way they'll invite me back when this whole thing's over. So check that out, wewillrecover.live, and check out the guys and girls at Activity Stream. You know that Martin and Einar are two of my best friends. I love those guys to death. ActivityStream.com. It's an awesome platform. Awesome people work on it. It's great. As I've been saying throughout this whole time, this thing is tough. Don't feel like you need to go through this alone. If you need somebody to talk to, just send me a note. It's dave@davewakeman.com. I'm here for you. We have a Slack community with 200-300 people from around the world in there. Don't feel like you need to go through this alone. It's a tough time. I think the mental toll on people is really something we should probably be paying a lot more attention to. So if you need to talk to somebody, I'm always around for you. All right. And thank you for listening again, because y'all still listen to me. So I'm glad I could, spend a little time with you, and I will talk to y'all soon.